The simple answer is that core values are something which you have within the company internally for your own team members and externally as well. So if say, if I was sort of meticulous about my planning, that'll be the same way at work and, even at home as well, for example. That's just the way human beings are designed to be. We're just different. We wear different clothes, for example, but inside us is the same person, the same heart, the same mind.
Hello and welcome to the Working From Home podcast with your host, me, Nelson Jordan. Today, I am really happy to be joined by Raj Goodman Anand, who is the founder of Goodman Lantern. They're a native English content writing company. Raj, thank you so much for joining us.
Nelson, good to be on. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
No problem. I find your story fascinating, and it's kind of a real sign of the times at the moment. I think the stuff that you're doing is going to be so useful to everyone else. So I'm delighted to have you here. I guess just for context then, obviously you're working heavily in remote working at the moment, but that wasn't always the case, was it?
Not at all. So this company, Goodman Lantern, is my third company. And before this, I was working for an organization in Europe. And over there, I was working in the office. I mean, I was the first sort of non-Latin, non-Spanish speaking person in the company, and joined the company as head of innovation and got into sort of management style stuff very quickly, and then became the CEO of the company. At some point, I was taking 280 flights per year around Asia and Europe to meet customers and to shake hands with them, which nowadays, obviously, Corona times, you won't do. But it was something which changed my perception of working from the office and to setting up sort of an office in every country, to kind of thinking about remote working a bit more. And actually, the transition I made eventually was to kind of reflect that this new lifestyle, which I think is very, very plausible, as well as actually makes life much easier, makes life much cheaper as well.
Just to clarify, did you say 280 in a year?
Yes. So Nelson was about one flight per day, more or less.
Jeez, yeah, in 3 days, you're doing like 2 flights on the average 3 day span. Wow. Okay. There was a time when I was working in Valencia and commuting back to Birmingham, and I took like 4 flights because I had to take indirect ones. I was taking like 4, maybe 5 flights a month, and I felt kind of hard done by a little bit and quite tired.
It's insane. I mean, I remember a time when I did, like, for example, dinner in New Delhi. I finished at about 12:30 at night, jumped on a flight at 4 o'clock to Heathrow Airport, followed by to have a breakfast, lunch at Madrid Barajas Airport, dinner in Barcelona, and then flew back to Asia via UAE. So I mean, that was all in like 1 day. So insane flying.
Yeah, pretty insane schedule. Well, I'm guessing the outcome of this already, and to kind of preempt where you're going with it, I'm guessing that was unsustainable.
Well, it was. I mean, I had just got married that time, so I just we got married with the aim to kind of spend time together, but actually I would just see my wife once a month. Somewhere nice, obviously. That was the perks of the job. I could actually travel quite a bit, and it was okay to kind of go somewhere nice. But it's not sustainable to really to kind of fly so much, and it's bad for our health. For example, I mean, I had a bulge in my back, for instance, from that flying. It wasn't awesome for like sleeping patterns, for example, or socializing. I had a set of friends in Brighton, some in London, some in Hong Kong, some in the Philippines, and it was very hard to kind of keep in touch with what's going on, for instance.
Sure. No, I totally get that. In terms of the health thing, because I was flying on the cheap a lot of the times, I was going on like Ryanair flights, EasyJet flights, things like that. Definitely not business or executive class. And my back really paid the price. Like these days, I have kind of an alternating sitting, standing desk, just because, I think that played, a large part, that I was traveling and I was in these really uncomfortable seats with not a lot of leg room and things like that. Yeah, I'm totally with you there. Was there a kind of a tipping point almost where you're like, I need to do something else now?
Well, I think multiple areas. I think one was obviously the flying part, which played a major role, but also with the company when I came in, they were doing about 7.5 million euros, and when I helped them scale up to 45 million in revenue, and obviously as you're a company sort of employee contractor, you really can't charge them what you really deserve, because there is an upper limit on company owner versus contractor, as it were. Um, and I think a combination of the fact that there is something which I can do, which my skill sets are to help scale up. My skill sets are to tell stories and narrate an idea, which helps the company get through some very difficult gatekeepers, because there is some interesting to offer there. And I thought to myself, well, I have this skill, I have this sort of opportunity to kind of think about something differently, working remotely, for instance, and building remote teams is something I did quite a lot in every company I've ever worked in, including my previous companies. And I thought to myself, the time has now come that I sort of say my goodbyes here, start my own venture, replicate some of the learnings I had in this company and my previous experiences, and then use that to allow my customers to have the benefit of storytelling and, for example, content, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it seemed like you already had an idea in your head from it. It wasn't like necessarily a point where you were like, well, I need to stop doing this. It was more like, well, actually, I think I'm better placed and I can serve people better by operating in this environment that I know about very well. I've already helped companies with. And you already were kind of thinking that that's going to be remote from the start, right?
Absolutely. So in all the companies I've worked in, except my first company, which was my venture after university, the idea of delegation and remote working were the two principles of where I kind of set the foundation of the company. So remote working for me is always been something that I think was going to scale up really well and it's going to become mainstream. But it took this year for it to become legit, and that people can actually work remote and they can work from home, and that's actually fine. Before this, the perception was if you don't have a glass office, you don't have something, a brand new spanking kind of office space, or a high street, or a refined or a lovely address, you are a legit company. And I think that's something which is a perception which has maybe changed a bit now. And people can work from home and be as productive, if not more.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to disrupt your flow too much, but we'll definitely talk about that kind of the signaling, I think, if we can, that goes on with office spaces later. I don't want to get in your way too much. But okay, so you were starting that company. You knew it was going to be centered around content. Did you set it up as a company where you were going to be very much in the trenches, or did you kind of set it up as a company that you would be leading, taking on this kind of CEO or MD role from the beginning and hiring those people to fulfill those roles?
Well, my philosophy is that to be able to delegate things, one needs to understand what it takes to really deliver, or offer the service. And so the first step I actually did was to kind of learn about what it takes to deliver the service. I'm not a copywriter. I'm actually an engineer by profession. But I really enjoy marketing. I've really enjoyed digital throughout the really early stages of my career. And so the first step was to really understand, how do we offer the service as a service, and not really like a custom service, but a productized way of building a company. So when one can understand our offering and say, okay, this is interesting, we'll go ahead and get your services, for example, which is then delivered in a step-by-step process. So we have a clear process designed for our customers to follow and our teams to follow as well. So my first step was the first couple of years, I was just trying to figure out what is the process we have to adopt for this. What will be the appetite? Who's a customer, for instance? The first couple of years, actually, I did waste a lot of time because I had just sold a company as well. So I had a full-time job and I had a company on the side, which I actually sold eventually. It was a good exit for me. So I was okay. I actually thought to myself, maybe I'd retire, to be honest, but no rest for the wicked, to be honest. So I was really very much into the next company without actually thinking about if I really want to work anymore or take it easy. So the first couple of years, I kind of spent time experimenting, thinking about stuff, building a team. So we got a few people on board as well, delegating some tasks. The growth really came the last 2 years. So the real growth for Goodman Lantern came the last 2 years, where the processes, the industry, the focus became much more clear for us. Now we understand exactly what we want to do. As a person, my job and my role is always been to kind of think about delegation and thinking of the helicopter view as opposed to working in the business, because I think that's not going to be helpful for a CEO to kind of do that sort of stuff. It's really, their role really is to coach, their role really is to delegate and to enable the teams to kind of perform, be the best person they can be for the particular role they're taking on. So that's what my role really is. And that coaching role, that sort of mentoring role is where I'm really focused on right now. And in the coming years, we want to take up that growth we've seen in the last 2 years and keep either going further, and to also help us think about, how can we become more efficient? How can we become even more tailored to our industries we're looking to focus, for example.
Okay. Well, I really want to talk for a second about this idea of productized services, because from what I've seen, like part of the reason, one of the large parts that a lot of agencies don't make the profit that they could make, because they are making, in a lot of cases, good revenue, but they're finding that because they take on a lot of custom work that doesn't necessarily look the same, they're not making the margins that they perhaps could. So could you tell me a little bit about productized and where that kind of mindset comes from and how to actually kind of implement it?
Of course. So now, having worked with a lot of agencies in the past, I've seen that agencies love to do everything. Like you can bring them on and they'll say, oh, we can do your ad campaigns, you can do your branding, you can paint your offices, you can supply your tea, you can do everything you like us to do. And I think that is where I don't want to be in that sort of area or in that kind of way of thinking, because I think when companies are specialists at what they do, they have a clear way to define a process in the company. That's one. Number two is it's clear what to recommend a company for. So, for example, if we're going to Samsung phones, Samsung probably isn't a bad example because they have multiple products, for instance. But if you look at, for instance, say a glass company which produces only high-end glass, for instance, then that's what you recommend them for. You don't tell them, you don't talk about them, and you're talking about, for example, cheap glass or glassware for your office, for instance. It's really high-end, custom designed glassware. That's what they do. So in a similar way, having a very very tight net focus on our business, our product, our service allows us to makes it easier for our customers to recommend us for the particular work we're doing. Also, we have a clear focus and process for it as well.
That's something I've noticed in my personal business. And I was talking to you before this call about how my business or businesses have changed over the course of this year, over 2020. And it's been quite significant. And one of the things that I found is actually when you do niche down, when you are known for something, you generate far, far more referrals. That's something that's happened to me, rather than if I talk about the copywriting and content strategy and content creation side of my business in particular, I started off kind of with the copywriting, writing for every industry you could think of, basically. Like this year, I've written for lots of real estate clients, dog training, gyms, SaaS companies, e-com companies. Just the list honestly could go on and on and on. Photographers as well, but for lots of those, I've just done one-off projects. Now, they're probably not going to be able to recommend me to somebody who is also going to use my products, or going to use my services, I should say, purely because if I work with somebody in real estate, well, they're not going to want to refer me to any competitors, are they? They're not going to want to say, oh, you should use this great copywriter, content strategist, because he'll get you X results, because that's competition for them. But when you're in like a particular industry where there's not necessarily competition, but there's some similarities there. So like within e-commerce, a luxury fashion company is quite happy to refer you to another company that specializes in games, for example. So really, the fact that you know how to make it work for e-com companies is the selling point. It's not the fact that you're suddenly kind of pinned in by this competition because people don't want to refer you to somebody who's basically going to make their life harder. So that's something that I've really, really noticed. The other thing is process. As you said then, just referring this to kind of something that I'm more familiar with. If you know how to do something once, there's a different kind of I suppose skill set that comes from just muddling your way through something versus doing it again and again and again and refining your process. It's like that quote, I can't remember who it's from. I might put it in the show notes, but it's unless you know how to explain what you're doing as a process, you don't actually know what you're doing. And I think that's something that rang really true to me. I've heard it several times said by people, and it's actually, for me, one step further. When you can kind of explain it and delegate it, that's when it's really a process. When you're not even there for somebody to come back and ask questions on, you've explained your processes so well, you've created the resources necessary, the SOPs that people can use to do the same task up to the standard that you'd expect from yourself as doing it. I think that's when you've nailed your processes.
Completely agree. I think that's important as well. I think delegation is a very important part as a company owner to kind of have in place, because when you bring in specialist people, they do their job. It's a bit like a factory, isn't it? You kind of go through a sort of a mill situation where you bring in different people doing different things for you, and they specialize in that, and they have passion for this and the experience of working on different projects in a similar kind of area. All of that put together builds a very nice process to get it done so that every part is taken care of properly. The client gets the proper experience of going through these different elements and getting it done well for them. So I'm a big believer of that. I think that's where I'm really focusing my energy on, is to even build a more specialist area of a company, for instance, and really focus on the value creation for our clients above and beyond what we just do for them, for instance.
Perfect. Well, I want to find an example of a process that would be relevant to a lot of service companies. And I think obviously I don't want to just narrow it down to the content side, because there'll be plenty of people listening that's not as relevant to. So I think a good idea for us to kind of talk about is your process for onboarding clients. So this is something that I don't think enough people spend time on. And it's so important to kick things off in the right way. So if you're able to talk about your process of onboarding, that would be fantastic.
Well, before I jump into the actual onboarding process, one thing I kind of want to mention is that my mindset as a person is long term. So when I hire team members, they are for the long haul. When I'm onboarding customers, I'm looking at if they have a long-term appetite. Because I think short-term and the short-term mindset leads to failures in the long run. So it really is about the long term, and the value is clear only when you look at the long term, for example. So that's why when the clients come on board, they're thinking about long term. And for long term customers, our mindset is to kind of put in something from our end, which is on our dime. So we don't charge them for this, for example. So for instance, with the onboarding process, we spend a lot of time to understand their vision, the values, and the core values, the mission, their sort of plan for the world domination, which they have said that they will do, for instance. And we spend a lot of time to really understand that, what they say was what they really do. For instance, we look at the competition, we look at their reviews by their customers on other sites, for instance, just to kind of check that what they're saying is actually in line with it. We do our homework. The first couple of months, this is something we do in parallel to our delivery of work for content, for example, or software if we were doing some of the design elements for them, for their brochures or their marketing or their marketing website, for example. And this way of working, when we write for them or when we do work for them, we are authentic because we are speaking just like they would, for instance. And that kind of representation of the company is where we bring in real value. Because at the end of the day, our role really is to make their life easier so they can focus on their core business and not on copywriting or content part of it. We want to take on that pain from them and deliver for them as and when they require things, for instance, on a monthly basis. And that's what we do. So it's important for us to really allow to represent them as themselves with their content on social media, on their blogs, articles they write, or long form like ebooks or white papers, for instance.
Okay, so it sounds to me then that you've got to focus on a few different areas. You've got kind of the understanding of the kind of customer reviews, your understanding of what the customers are actually saying about your product, or your client's product, your client's service, but also the understanding about the company, what the company is actually saying about themselves. So I guess that could be distilled down to core values or brand guidelines or mission, or everyone has kind of a slightly different term for this. So do you ever find some sort of disparity between what the clients say they believe in versus what you think they actually believe in based on the customer reviews or based on your observations of how the company actually operates?
The simple answer is that core values are something which you have within the company internally for your own team members and externally as well. So if say, if I was sort of meticulous about my planning, I'll be the same way at work and, even at home as well, for example. That's just the way human beings are designed to be. We are just different, we wear different clothes, for example, but inside us is the same person, the same heart, the same mind. So often at times what we do is we will ask them for their core values, their mission, their vision, and we try to ask them questions, and we try to be supportive, but also ask them hard questions upfront, because it's really important for us to understand the true company ABC, so that we really understand their way of working. Sometimes there is a disparity there, which we discover in the first month or so. And again, are very, very clear and transparent about our approach. Listen, Mr. Customer or Miss Customer, I noticed that there is a bit of disparity there. If you were us, how would you address the situation, for example, is what we ask them. And then it's up to the customer to explain to us what they believe is the case. This is not trying to catch the customer as such. That's not what we're trying to do. Our aim is to represent them with their content. So we have to be clear on the tone, the voice we have for them. And if that's not clear, then actually we won't be like them on their blogs or when they're doing guest blogging, for example, or in their the videos, for instance, as well.
So I'm curious. I mean that all made complete sense to me. have you ever got pushback from clients when you're doing all this onboarding work, particularly the work that you do to understand their mission and values, from clients that say, hang on, why do you need this? Why do you need this information? Why do you need to understand our core values? We just want you to create content.
As a company, our business is to build a long-term business for us and for our clients. And while the clients select us, in the background, even we select the clients as well. And so we're very careful about people who bring on have the same vision for the long term, the long haul. If the client doesn't have that kind of vision or mindset, it's actually not going to help them or us, because it's going to create some sort of friction at some point working with them. So the answer simply is that, typically when we bring clients on, they are in the same mindset as us. They have a very clear outlook towards that this is going to be something we're going to be focusing on for a few years. We've got a very clear sort of plan, maybe a content plan, for example, or just a plan for our marketing and our vision, and we'll execute that plan. Sometimes, we have had, obviously, everyone makes mistakes, and we've had one of the customers who didn't really match our values, for instance, and we're very polite about the situation and say, listen, obviously there's a bit of a disagreement on our ways of working, and we will help you with what we can, but also maybe in the long term it's not a good fit for us, and we'll allow you to find someone else, and we'll recommend some other customer agency to you. And it's just being transparent with the client. I think at the end of the day, what we do is what we love. We put a heart, mind, and soul into it, and we want to work on projects which are really interesting for the client and for us, and we want to make sure that we deliver the best possible job for them. And for that, it requires to be open and transparent with them about our feelings about what they're doing. And if they're open to our thoughts and working with us together, that's awesome. Hopefully we'll show them some great results very quickly, and we always do. But equally, if there is a bit of disparity and they aren't open, and because there's a different mindset, which is, as I said, it's very rare that we have it, because we have a very strong interview process in place in both directions, then we find a way to kind of say, we find some other agencies might be a better fit for you.
Fantastic. I mean, I think we should spend more time talking about this vetting process, because it's something that is incredibly common in the agency world, is incredibly common in freelancers, in just seeing somebody with money, a client that has, that wants to use your service, has the financial means to use your service, whatever it is that you're offering. And I feel like it's unfortunate that too many people take on whatever clients that come to them. So it's not really a critical selection process. And I've come across agencies that say that they're very selective with their clients, but actually when it gets down to brass tacks, they will essentially take on anybody that has the budget. And it's kind of this, for me, it's this short-term versus long-term outlook. Yes, you're taking on money, you're taking on clients. That's fantastic for the short term. And I'm kind of putting aside for the minute, like, obviously there's a caveat that sometimes you just need to keep the lights on, especially this year. So, nobody kind of get angry with me and tell me I've missed that out. Sometimes I've been in the situation as well, where I've worked with people that are less than ideal, people who I don't necessarily even like much on a personal level. I have worked with them before when I've needed the money as a freelancer. But as soon as I got into the position where that wasn't the case, I became far more selective about who I wanted to work with. For example, I'm all about the long-term versus short-term. So if people are kind of saying, okay, when will we see results? And they're constantly talking about that sort of thing. For me, that's a red flag, especially when you're talking about something that it is kind of an upfront investment, but takes a long time to pay off, like content strategy, for example. Yes, you can see your short-term wins, but like a lot of the time when I work with clients, I say, okay, well, we're interested in kind of hitting that like big exponential uptick between 9 and 12 months. And a lot of people can say they can wait that long, and then in reality don't. They can't. They get pressure from above. They get pressure internally to kind of generate those results. And for content especially, it's a much longer play than like paid traffic acquisition. For example, I can set up a PPC campaign in the next 2 hours and have something live with Google by the end of the day. And will drive traffic now, whereas I can't even write an article by the end of today, let alone edit it, publish it getting picked up by Google, it finally getting some traction, then, doing kind of link building and things like that and outreach. It's got a lot of kind of upfront work before you see results. So that kind of really dialing in the sort of customers, the sort of clients that you want to take on is so important for growth. It's so important if you don't want to just survive. You actually want to flourish. So what are your thoughts on that kind of mentality of taking on any clients versus being incredibly selective?
Well, a couple of things. I think first answer probably from the point of view of just to kind of address that content situation. Content is a gift that keeps giving. And I think that's something is to kind of clarify for everybody who's listening to this show is that, with content, when you invest into content, especially with SEO, for example, it will pay back in multiples in the coming months and years, and just on and on. With advertising, generally speaking, when you switch off the advertising, the traffic falls off, and so does the leads and the sales.
Yeah, so, I mean, using that PPC example, yes, I can get something started today, but if I turn that campaign off tomorrow, there's your traffic source gone. That it doesn't exist anymore. Whereas you said, with SEO, you can create something today that's still bringing in traffic in 10 years' time.
And Rome wasn't built overnight. It took a long time to kind of build something tangible. And if it was as simple as switching on something very quickly and getting results for you, then it's probably the barrier to entry for competitors actually is lower as well. So it's actually not sustainable, really, as a strategy for any company to really focus only on advertising PPC. It has to be a marketing mix. And when it comes to our role which we play as a company, we are part of a bigger mix. And our aim is to be supportive and by the side of our customers through thick and thin, and to really support them with that marketing mix. And that's really important for us as a company. To address this in general, I believe in the power of no. Like, it's really important to not only say yes to everything, but also to know sometimes when it's not a good fit for us. Because I think when clients especially hear a no, it is a bit offensive for them. I get it. I mean, I'm also a client. We have suppliers as well. But equally, you respect their mission, their vision, their core values as a company, that they're focused on what they do and do it really well. I come across this was one company in the UK, they call it Hicks Design. I don't know if you heard about Hicks Design.
No.
Google it. I came across them through somebody who worked with many years back. They have built logos for some of the largest tech companies like Mozilla, for example. Really, really great logo designs, for example. And they aren't cheap. But there's a queue to get designs built by these guys because they're so bloody good. And I think the value of no is that when you say no to everything and anything, you actually are saying that I'm a much more niche player, that I do this one thing really well. I'm a skill company team doing this particular job, and that's what I'm going to do. And if you want this, come back to us. If not, doesn't matter. But often what happens is when you say no to one customer for a generic job, for example, you get 3-4 other more niche jobs which are in line with your sort of skills and values. And I think that's what the value of saying no is. And I believe in it. And I think it's really important that we all practice this as companies, because will give us a much more focus in our life and really enjoy the work we do actually.
So for me, the power of no, I think is incredibly important. And I see it for agencies and freelancers in particular. I see it in two different contexts. There's saying no to specific clients, which allows you to focus on just getting well known in one industry, for one thing. And then there's saying no to specific services as well. So recently, one of our e-commerce clients that we work with on the Facebook and Instagram advertising side came to us and asked us, because they liked what we were doing, they'd had great results. They also wanted us to take on email advertising. And I had to just be incredibly upfront with them and just say, look, that's not something that we want to particularly get involved with, but because we've got a really, really good relationship with the client, they own multiple companies, they just brought on another brand. I actually went out and found them somebody from my network. Therefore, I was able to help out both the person in my network, but also the client. And I found them somebody. I effectively hired them a freelancer to work on that stuff, because it's not something that I want the agency, I want myself to become good at, like e-commerce emails, for example. Yeah, we'll offer that, we'll set it up, we might even help you manage it as the middleman. But this isn't a core competency for us that we want to focus on, because it inevitably will detract from growth in other areas. You've got a certain amount of time per day, you've got a certain amount of resources. Of course, it's going to impact.
Absolutely. I think there's a time also in the company where in the beginning we take on everything, and that's absolutely fine. But as we understand what the business is all about and what we really enjoy and can deliver, that's when we can change our tactic to be more focused around the stuff which is going to create the maximum value for both parties.
That's it. And again, just seeing it from a personal level, we talked about the kind of website copywriting projects that I was taking on when I was kind of a little newer to it. It was everything that paid money, I think would be a fair classification. And now I've kind of, my first kind of niche was, okay, well, I'm just going to do copywriting and content strategy and content creation within SaaS and e-commerce companies, because that's my background, that's what I know well, that's what I'm passionate about. And even these days, I might eventually niche further into just doing content strategy and content creation for SaaS and e-com. I might drop the copywriting elements, and it might be something that I still offer to companies that I'm working with on the content strategy side as a bit of a value add, but I won't necessarily go out and pitch any new business on the copywriting side. So yeah, we see this journey with companies that are operating well, I think. And it's quite interesting that sometimes you have this this kind of SaaS terminology of land and expand, but typically for agencies, like the ones that do well, I think a lot of them go the other way. A lot of them go, let's experiment with this, and this. Let's see what finds traction, and then let's just get super, super good at this one thing.
Absolutely. I think one thing which is very interesting is that in SaaS world, there's a terminology called MRR, monthly recurring revenue. And I've seen that MRR typically increases when you have a customer who's there with you longer. So it's actually cheaper to retain customers than to get new customers in general. So the actual acquisition cost is actually much lower when you kind of keep your current customers on board. And to increase the MRR of an agency as such, we need to be focused on giving our customers the best value for money and giving the best service, for example, to make sure they're really happy. So my way of thinking is that if we keep them with the stuff which we're really good at and deliver that, day in, day out, it's a much better strategy to help them sustain as a client than to kind of show them different things you can't really do and you're making things up as you're going along. So that's what we try to do as well. Saying that, there's also an element of expansion. Sometimes, when you are looking at doing, say, a task, there's an opportunity to expand a little further into a different area, which is maybe sort of adjacent to it, for example. And I think for those kind of opportunities, there has to be a circumference around what you can do and what you can't do, for example. So instead of going, million miles away from, say, building, landing page, and you start looking at building VR software and stuff, you're like, oh, that's now way too different from where you were initially. And so that's really important to kind of keep a nice little mix there for ourselves, but equally not go million miles away from our core mission and vision of a company.
That makes total sense. I mean, Charlie Munger, who's the longtime investment partner of the more well-known in some circles, Warren Buffett, the billionaire investor. I don't know how many billions he's racked up now. But he has this idea of kind of circles of competency, this kind of area that you're really good at. And the theory is, your mistakes and your failures happen when you step too far outside of your circle of competence. And I see that same thing with companies. Yes, you can take on something that is adjacent to that. So maybe if you start by doing, and we'll keep this as a content example, maybe if you start with the research and the creation of the content, maybe you could also learn how to do effective distribution as well of that content. But it's probably not a great idea if that's your core competency to then do, okay, we're also going to do web development. Because it's two completely different skill sets. It's like different audiences as well. There's going to be so much to learn. It's just going to really put you into quite tricky waters. So the way I kind of think about it is this almost like a Venn diagram. There's this kind of circle of things you could do, and then the circle of all the possibilities, and then there's this much smaller part of things you should do based on all of those opportunities. And sometimes it takes some trial and error to find actually what is within your kind of circle of competence. But other times you can kind of use this framework in your head to say, actually, what am I good at? Is this new service that the client is requesting? It's not something that you're necessarily all the time trying to foist on them, to find new revenue streams. It might be something that they ask for. Is that too far outside of what we can do? What is the opportunity cost of pursuing this new service? What would we have to give up in order to pursue that? Because, if you're focusing on getting better at your job, you've got less time, you've got less resources. It really does add up. And I don't think enough people are aware of what happens when you stretch yourself too thin in terms of your offering. There's the direct impact in terms of, this is quite easy to see. If I spend 2 hours a day working on this, that's 2 hours less that I have to do this. But there's also this indirect, this kind of indirect impact of this, for example, the stuff we talked about, niching and its impact on referrals earlier. Now people don't really know what to refer you as to their colleagues or to to people that they've worked with in the past or people in their network. You're not like those content guys anymore. You're kind of like, well, they do a bit of content, they do a little bit of email, bit of web dev, but suddenly you're muddying the water. You're not stand out in one thing. You're just kind of jack of all trades. Yeah, they're all right at this, they're all right at that, but it's so hard to get good at one thing. And why would you try and get good at 4 things at the same time?
Completely agree. I think again, there was, before we jump on this on the show, we discussed about this book Build to Sell by John Warlow. And I think that book talks about how having this one focus is such an important thing. And I think it's, this also applies to investment. I mean, I now do investment into startups as well, for example, as an angel investor. And my philosophy is simple. I only invest in content related businesses. So whether they are SaaS businesses doing content, for example, or they are just businesses which require raw content, for example, within them. That's what their business is all about. That's what all I invest in. I don't invest in, I'm actually an AI engineer as far as I studied at university. I don't really invest in AI companies unless they are in this specific niche of content writing. That's what I believe in. That's why I kind of focus my attention, my life. That's why I eat and drink and sleep, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it helps you to understand far more than people that are just dabbling, I suppose, in that. So even within within agencies, there's ways to offer these multiple things and not kind of go belly up, I suppose. And the way to do it is by employing specialists. Yes, they've got to have a certain level of understanding how their specialism impacts the rest of, whether it's the marketing mix or we're in some discipline. And the people that get promoted and kind of work, between teams, especially, they need the knowledge of how it all fits together. But really, you want the people that do nothing else but this thing, because they're going to be like the A players, basically, aren't they? They're the people that know this stuff, like live, breathe, and sleep it. Could talk about it in their sleep, and probably do. That for me, they're the sort of people that I want to hire. So I kind of see that as my clients. Like, they probably want to hire somebody similar who not only does this stuff day in and day out, but also is involved in the community, also knows all the key players, also knows kind of what's going on at any one time. So it makes complete sense for me. And with regards to your investment kind of ideology as well, that makes complete sense.
Thank you.
No worries at all. So you've obviously kind of experienced tremendous growth. Have you seen kind of any teething pains in terms of bringing on new employees or freelancers, changing kind of your delegation from just individuals to then delegating to people who are then delegating?
Well, this year has been like last year has been the year of growth. It's been incredible. I mean, this last month, we've been hiring a lot of team members, and I believe the first 40 team members of the company are the company founders. Even if their role is to manage the office, for example, it's still, which obviously we don't have one. We don't have an office, but it is important that we bring in the people with the right mindset. And again, I keep talking about core values, and that's really important for us. We have core values, and they're really, experimentation, implementation, integrity, encouragement. These are all things which we believe in, and we want that our team members have the same mindset. So when they come in for interviews, for example, we ask questions which are also the scope of normal sort of, your skill sets and stuff, to kind of ask them about their life and how they are maybe off work, for instance, so we can understand the core values and if they match with our stuff.
Just to jump in here, Raj. Yeah. I was actually going to ask the question. Okay, well, being kind of remote first and in your setup, how do you kind of communicate your values to these employees? But it sounds like actually you've kind of answered that. It's not necessarily that you focus on communicating them, but you purposely select for people who already meet those values.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a very interesting document by Netflix about their core values and how they communicate that, for instance. And while we are not there with Netflix, obviously, but we made a really conscious effort to put out there our vision for our future team members and our social mission as well. So, as a company, we want to help encourage women in the industry. In the tech industry, especially, and digital marketing as well, there are less women than men, and a lot of boardrooms are full of men, for example. That doesn't help the industry. Actually, we need to kind of have a more diverse mix of people in the boardrooms, in senior mid management as well. And so we encourage and empower women by hiring more of them. 90% of our team members are women. They are in senior roles, mid management roles, and junior roles as well. And we really help to empower them. And for our clients to hiring us implies that they actually bring in that sort of a diverse mindset to their company as well, and their thoughts and their processes comes into the company. That's again really important for us. This is part of who we are. This is my third company, and this company is not only about sort of making money for me and my shareholders. It's also about giving back something. And this is what we really believe in. This is what we are all about. So like finding people is actually not that difficult, because we often get referrals from our current employees and team members. And there's a whole big queue there, for example. But to make sure that they are in the same mindset, the same core values, is really important for us. So the interview process is a bit lengthy, but it's important to find the right player. So that each one who comes in, even if they're right at the bottom of the role, they will kind of grow with us, and they will come to a management role at some point in their career with us, and they'll be with us for many, many years to come.
Fantastic. Well, I think there's this concept of almost self-selecting for the applicants, right? By you kind of accomplish this by putting your values and your beliefs and making them known, putting them out in the ether, so people can understand what it is you believe in, not just when it comes time to hire, but also just during the normal course of business. And then you'll suddenly find that you get applications from people that meet those, regardless of not whether you actually have roles open. There's this kind of like, you guys believe in that, I believe in that as well, maybe we should work together. And you're seeing that through the referrals as well from current employees who think, if I believe in that, then chances are that lots of my friends will believe in the same things. Lots of the places that I've already worked will believe in the same thing. So I think that's really key and really clever. Raj, I also love how you mention kind of your focus on female employees and diversity. This is something I've talked about several times on the podcast now. I feel like the world of traditional work has failed several key demographics, from a personal level, women in particular, falling out of the workplace or struggling to find their place, particularly around the time when they have kids. I feel like the current workplaces, there are some good ones that make it easier for women to return and to the workplace, at least in a part-time capacity, and kind of offer childcare and stuff like that. But honestly, I think those companies are few and far between. I like the context of all the kind of potential that remote work brings, especially when it's kind of asynchronous and doesn't have to take part at set times through the day. Like, so many jobs require you to work between 9 and 5, say, between these set hours. But, I had one of my friends in Valencia. She's a primary school teacher who was teaching via Zoom. Obviously, she has set hours, and she really struggled with that because she still had to breastfeed or pump at various times, and she's a single mum, so she's got a baby around, and I kind of feel like there are a lot of women that struggle to get back into work, and I feel like even if their goal is to get back into this kind of traditional, maybe office work kind of paradigm, which is absolutely fine, you've got to do what's right for you, that maybe remote work offers kind of an interim opportunity for them, almost a stepping stone to get back into the workforce. And, they might find that they never want to go back to traditional work. I found that, particularly because I have a lot of freelancer friends, the kind of freedom that is brought, particularly on the schedule, allows you to have a better family life. Suddenly you're not spending all your time commuting. You don't have to be set places at set times. You can take your kids on the school run and be around for them and help them with their homework and and work on other times. What's your kind of view on the future of that? Do you think that's going to increase?
I really hope so, Nelson. I really, really hope so. For several centuries, we've had this sort of mindset that women are meant to be at home and men are meant to go and earn. I completely oppose that. I think that's a stupid idea, to be honest, in the first place. I mean, just look at the response to coronavirus, COVID-19 in countries which has female leadership have outperformed the male leadership in the response to coronavirus. Almost in every country, it's kind of clear that that's happened. And I think it's a testament of what women can bring to the leadership roles, for example. There's a lot women can do, and they don't get the opportunity to do so. I remember from my experiences growing up, I've seen women who were not given the opportunity, and they were just so bright and so driven to make a change, but because of where they were or where they were born or the culture they were born in, they just couldn't do it. And I think that's just very wrong, to be honest. I feel really strongly about it. It's also part of the UN SDG goals, alongside pollution and climate change, for example. It's really high up in the agendas of UN as well. And I think all of us should make an effort to encourage women to be able to perform. Now, there's one thing I learned from my experience at Goodman Lantern and beyond, that women require flexibility. I think something you're talking about as well. Whether they have a family, for example, or they have other needs. Flexibility is something which women require more, in my experience, working at Goodman Lantern than maybe the men I've worked with at the company. And because we work in an environment where we can be flexible and we work in a very global kind of context, actually that allows people to set their own times. And they delegate things from their management position to someone else in the team as well. So I think today we have the ability to kind of perform and work at the same level as we can from the office, from the likes of internet, Zoom, mobile phones, for example. And let's use that to actually get more people into the workforce who can add some really good value and actually help us neutralize this sort of male-dominated in the boardrooms and beyond of companies, and actually help us all build a sustainable future for us, for our kids. I mean, for my daughter, I'd like her to come into a workforce where everything is a little bit more equal, for instance. And I think it's going to not only help us, it's going to help the entire sort of human race as such.
Sure, I'm 100% with you there. Like one of the things that we haven't touched on so much, and because it's an incredibly complex topic, I'm somewhat reticent to mention it towards the end of an episode, but at the same time, I feel it's important, so it needs saying. For the listeners, please just appreciate that there's not enough time and enough depth to do this subject justice, but it does need saying. I'm kind of in the age group where I have several friends that are trying to have children and are struggling. From a purely biological perspective, they'd be much more fertile at a younger age than they are now, but they've been pushed into this kind of career first mentality. They get promotions and they do perform at work, and the family side, obviously there's a biological imperative to start a family earlier rather than later, just in terms of potential success rate for getting pregnant, but also fewer problems if you have babies younger rather than older. I also feel like a place where remote work can really help from a societal level and make things better is by saying to women, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be all career or all family. You can have both together. You can, if you want to have children earlier, then hopefully remote work will be a tool to kind of aid that process. Hopefully we'll see less heartbreak of people getting to, early 30s, mid 30s, deciding, okay, now they feel like they're at a place in their career where they can have children, and then realizing that there may be past it from a biological perspective and they might struggle, which is heartbreaking. So I'm kind of hoping there's remote work, and it's not the panacea. Like, let's be clear about that. It's not fully worked out yet, but I'm hoping it's a stepping stone in the right direction for a lot of these people, that these groups, these demographic groups. And I feel like the demographics, like women who, in terms of the career race, have drawn the short straw because of their responsibilities. You know, traditionally, women have been the main caregivers. I feel like remote work will go some way to kind of rectifying or equalizing that disparity. At least, kind of, that's what I'm hoping for. Raj, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. I'd love to have you back on at some point, maybe to dive into the kind of topic of women in the workplace and stuff that companies like yourself can do to improve those. Tell me a little bit about Goodman Lantern, where we can find them if we're interested, and where we can learn more about you as well.
Sure, thanks. So if you Google Goodman Lantern, you'll hopefully find us as the first link. If not, then something is wrong with our SEO, but hopefully it's not. The goodmanlantern.com is a link to our website, and you can find me on LinkedIn. Look for Raj Goodman Anand, and add me as a connection and drop me a message. I'd love to hear from people, so certainly get in touch. And Nelson, I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity. I really, really enjoyed the discussion, and love to be back on the show when you're all ready.
Fantastic. Thanks, Raj. And that's it for today. You've been listening to the Working From Home podcast with me, Nelson Jordan. We've been talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly side of remote work. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you've enjoyed the time you've spent with us today. If you'd like to discuss the podcast, you want to make a new friend, or you're interested in working with me on a copywriting or digital marketing project, then visit nelson-jordan.com. That's nelson-jordan.com, where you can also sign up to my newsletter to hear about this podcast and other exciting projects. Until next week, goodbye.